Number 10. World War I submarine. In late 2010, shifting sands along the French coast revealed the remains of a World War I-era German submarine. Known as a UC-61, the rusted vehicle ran aground over a century ago in 1917 in the northern part of the country near the seaside commune of Wissant. The ship flooded and the crew abandoned the vessel, and soon enough it became buried in the sand. This wasn't the first time the submarine appeared from beneath the sand. Wissant Mayor Bernard Brack told the BBC that the wreck emerges every 2 or 3 years, depending on the tides. It's never visible for long before it's once again hidden beneath the seabed. But more of the vessel could be seen this time around than ever before, according to local tour guide Vincent Schmidt, who was hopeful that the winds and tides would expose even more of the submarine. U-61 is thought to have sunk at least 11 Allied ships before it ran aground, either by laying mines or shooting torpedoes. It was on its way from Belgium to France to lay mines, but thankfully never got that opportunity before the accident happened. Number 9. Asteroid Flyby. On October 24th, an asteroid the size of a refrigerator barreled through the sky, coming shockingly close to the Earth. Astronomers found out about it hours after it passed within 1,800 miles, 3,000 kilometers above Antarctica. This may sound far, but it's actually a pretty big deal. There are satellites even further away than this. According to CNET, it was the third closest asteroid to pass by the planet without actually hitting it. Scientists didn't know about the space rock because it came from the sun's direction as it approached the Earth's daytime side, making it difficult to detect the small, dim object. The good news is that the asteroid wasn't big enough to cause any serious damage to the planet if it were to hit. Measuring just 6.6 feet, 2 meters in diameter, it would have burned up in the atmosphere before reaching the ground. NASA considers a space object to be dangerous when it measures at least 460 feet, 140 meters in diameter. Just in case a much bigger asteroid ever comes uncomfortably close to us, the agency is investigating potential ways to protect the Earth from a collision. Known as the Double Asteroid Redirection Test, DART, an upcoming experiment will test the effectiveness of deflecting asteroids by hitting them with high-speed spacecraft. That's some real Star Wars stuff right there. But as this recent discovery reminds us, scientists can only stop an object from hitting the Earth if they know that it's coming in the first place. Number 8. Fraudulent medieval map. Yale University announced the discovery of the Vinland map in 1965, a supposed medieval rendering of North America. At the time, experts claimed that it was one of the oldest maps of the continent. They cited it as evidence that the Vikings reached the western Atlantic during the 15th century. Its authenticity was soon called into question and has remained a hot topic of debate ever since. The map's provenance can only be traced as far back as 1957, when an antiques collector bought it from an undisclosed European source, and its ink crumbles in a way that had never been seen with medieval ink. Further adding to the suspicions is the fact that the map seemed to be accurate for the time period it was attributed to. A group of researchers first declared the artifact a forgery in 1973, but many still remained open to the idea that it could be real. The debate raged on until recently, when Yale experts declared once and for all that the map is a fake. A new study found that the ink contains a titanium compound that didn't appear in the product until the 1920s, thus finally putting the controversy to rest. Raymond Clemens, who is the curator of early books and manuscripts at Yale's Beinecke Rare Book Library, emphasized the importance of solving mysteries like this. He told the New York Times that fraudulent objects like the Vinland map soak up a lot of intellectual airspace. Clemens also pointed out that whoever created the map was very skilled, and that it was convincing enough to fool many talented scholars over the years. Even though it's a proven forgery, the map will remain in Yale's collection. The story behind it is fascinating, making it a valuable artifact in its own right. Number 7. Gladiator's Cell. There were around 230 amphitheaters throughout the ancient Roman Empire. One of them was the Richborough Roman Amphitheater, located in modern-day Kent, England. Its ruins were identified 172 years ago, but archaeologists continue to make discoveries at the site. Recently, they found a cell that held either people or animals while they waited to perform or be executed. Known as a carcer, it would have contained gladiators awaiting combat, prisoners who were about to be put to death, or creatures who were about to go fight for their lives. The Richborough Amphitheater seated 5,000 spectators and is thought to be one of the most important sites in Roman Britain. Experts believe that it was built during the 1st century. Once painted in red and blue hues, the structure had a unique appearance unlike any other amphitheater throughout Britain. Artifacts from the surrounding settlement, including coins, animal bones, and pottery fragments, indicate that the Romans occupied the site until almost the end of the 4th century, around the same time the empire collapsed. Hey there, real quick, if you're new to the channel, welcome. Thanks for checking us out. If you're liking this video so far, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Oldest footprints in the Americas. New Mexico's White Sands National Park is home to a collection of 23,000-year-old human footprints. Their discovery has dialed back the earliest known human presence in North America by at least 10,000 years. The footprints were made on an ancient lake bed over a several thousand-year period during what's known as the last glacial maximum. Before the glaciers of the last ice age melted, children and teenagers walked along the lake, unknowingly making their mark in history. This marks a turning point in the ongoing debate over who first stepped into the Americas and when. Some researchers will argue that people reached the continent much earlier than when the footprints were made, but solid evidence of this is lacking. For example, a study published last year claimed to have found 26,000-year-old human-made tools and other rock artifacts in New Mexico. But there are many archaeologists who believe that the objects were just naturally formed. The fossilized footprints are a game-changer, however. Their dating seems accurate, which means they were probably in North America at a time when scientists previously believed the continent was blocked from entry by ice sheets. For this reason, most experts believed until recently that people arrived in the Americas no longer than 13,000 years ago. They traced the earliest human presence in the Clovis people, a culture named for their unique spearheads. Now, researchers are faced with the question of who arrived in North America before the Clovis people and when they got here. Number 5. Egyptian official's tomb. A man named Ta-Mwiya, who lived over 3,200 years ago, was an ancient Egyptian government official who wore several hats. Working under the pharaoh Ramesses II, he served as the head of treasury and the chief supervisor of livestock. Ramesses II ruled from 1279 to 1213 BC. At the time, minted coins didn't exist yet. Instead, people used goods, rations, and precious metals as currency, meaning that Ta-Mwiya's job as the head of treasury may have been much different than it is by modern definition. Archaeologists recently discovered the high-ranking official's tomb at the vast Saqqara necropolis. In it, they found artwork depicting people leading cattle and other animals to slaughter. There are also engravings of a man, perhaps Ta-Mwiya himself, who sits on a horn-like object near a collection of jars. Experts are currently working to decipher some hieroglyphics found above the carvings. The ancient writing indicates that Ta-Mwiya was tasked with making divine offerings at one of Ramesses' many temples at Thebes. So far, no human remains appear to have been found in the tomb, but more discoveries could be made as archaeologists continue to excavate the burial and the surrounding area. Number 4. Marlow Warlord. An elite Anglo-Saxon man died and was laid to rest with his weapons sometime during the 6th century in what is now Berkshire, England. Last year, a metal detectorist discovered ancient bowls at the site, prompting archaeologists to investigate further. They found the man's skeleton buried with his sword and spears. Known as the Marlow Warlord, experts think that he may have been a skilled warrior and member of his community. But it's also possible that the man was buried with weapons as a symbolic gesture, according to early medieval archaeology expert Dr. Gabor Thomas. Speaking with The Guardian, he explained that masculinity was a significant part of the culture at the time. The man's skeleton showed that he was around 6 feet with a robust build. It's clear based on his grave goods that he was wealthy as well. He was buried separate from the rest of the community on an overlook above the Thames River, a place that might have been reserved for a tribal leader or some other person of high-ranking status. During Anglo-Saxon times, the region was a borderland that saw heavy conflict as kingdoms fought for control over the territory. The Marlow Warlord's burial suggests that a powerful tribe lived there in the area before other kingdoms moved in on them. Tests are being carried out on the skeleton to determine the man's age and if he had any medical conditions, and to glean any other details about his life that his remains can tell us. Number 3. World War II ghost ships. Recently, following seismic activity from an underwater volcano, 24 World War II-era ghost ships surfaced 800 miles, 1,287 kilometers off the Japanese coast near the island of Iwo Jima. The volcano, known as Fukutoku Okanoba, has been continuously erupting since August, causing the seabed to rise and raising the ships into view. Iwo Jima is part of the Bonin Islands, a volcanic chain in a region that's prone to earthquakes and eruptions. The ships that recently turned up near the island's coast are the remnants of Japanese transport vessels that the U.S. military sank in 1945 during the Battle of Iwo Jima. It was one of the bloodiest conflicts of the entire war. It raged on for 36 days. 70,000 U.S. Marines went up against a 20,000-strong Japanese force, killing or taking prisoner all but 216 Japanese soldiers. Nearly 7,000 Americans were killed and another 20,000 were wounded. Iwo Jima had no port, so the Marines scuttled the enemy ships parallel to the island's shore to create a breakwater. Now that the vessels have reappeared, they'll probably stay put for a while. As live science writer Ben Turner pointed out, Iwo Jima is littered with unexploded bombs and grenades. Nobody lives there, and civilians rarely, if ever, visit. For safety's sake, the Japanese government will probably leave the ships in place rather than remove or scrap them. Number 2. The world's biggest treasure hoard? Since 1987, an international team of treasure hunters known as the Temple 12 has been searching in Finland for a huge collection of gold, jewels, and other artifacts known as the Lemminkainen hoard. Every summer, they work for 6 hours a day, 7 days a week, in hopes of finding the colossal hoard, which is rumored to be worth an estimated $20 billion. According to legend, the stash contains 50,000 gemstones, including rubies, sapphires, emeralds, and diamonds. The Temple 12 also believe that they'll find 1,000 other artifacts dating back thousands of years, including 18-carat life-sized gold statues. The legend of the treasure is rooted in the Lemminkainen people of Finnish pagan mythology. In 1984, a landowner named Ior Bak claimed that he was a descendant of the Lemminkainen, and that the treasure they had left behind was on his property. It was supposedly sealed off during the 10th century to protect it from looters. Bak died in 2010, but those who believe in his tale of treasure continue to search the Sibosborg cave system outside Helsinki, where they think it's hidden. The Temple 12 believe that they're just meters away from finding it. They'll find out next year when they return to the site to continue digging. Number 1. Ancient Antarctic wildfires. Between 166 million years ago, during the late Cretaceous period, Earth underwent one of its warmest periods. Antarctica was ice-free at the time and was home to temperate forests filled with pine trees, ferns, flowering plants, and dinosaurs. It became increasingly isolated from other land masses as the supercontinent Gondwana broke up, causing it to drift toward the South Pole. Throughout this time period, wildfires ravaged the northern hemisphere and tore through parts of the southern hemisphere. Until just recently, scientists were unsure of whether Antarctica saw any of these catastrophic blazes. Researchers recently examined fossilized plants from James Ross Island that bore a charcoal-like residue. A detailed look at the evidence confirmed their suspicions that wildfires did, in fact, occur throughout Antarctica. The once frozen continent had a lot more going on during the late Cretaceous period than it does now. It was rife with volcanic activity, lightning strikes, and fireballs from falling meteors, which combined in the worst possible way with the flammable plants that covered the land. It's entirely possible that the volcanic activity triggered the deadly blaze that created the charcoal that scientists studied. These findings are extremely promising, and the team is currently searching other parts of Antarctica for evidence of prehistoric fires. Number 10. Alien hangar in the mountains. A mysterious trio of tunnels have been discovered hidden on the side of a mountain in the last place you'd expect, near Area 51 in the Nevada desert. The tunnels aren't even that well hidden, since they can be seen by anyone who opens up Google Earth and zooms in on the general region of the Nevada desert. There seems to be a road winding up the mountain to the entrance of the tunnels, and then a kind of plateau directly in front of the 3 rectangles of darkness. To the untrained eye, this might look like a mine or 3 mineshaft openings going deep into the earth. But according to some, this is actually an alien hangar. The tunnel entrances are supposedly hangar entrances designed for huge alien spaceships to fly in and out of. No one can verify having actually witnessed an alien ship coming in or out of one of these hangars, but there's no denying what they look like. This could be very real evidence of an underground alien base that the US government is keeping secret. For all we know, these hangar entrances go miles below the Earth to a subterranean alien lair. Number 9. Mountain skeleton. Jawahir Hedgie was last seen on December 23rd, walking along the Amargosa Trail in Nevada. 3 days later, on December 26th, her family reported her missing. They hadn't heard from her ever since she went on that hike. The police discovered her car near a building site, her keys were on the hood, and her wallet and cell phone were inside the vehicle. And yet Jawahir was nowhere to be found. No trace of her was found until September 6, 2021, when a hiker happened upon a human skull up in the mountains. This was extra shocking because the Las Vegas police had been searching the same area where her skull was found, and yet they'd uncovered nothing. Jawahir's mom has since accused the Vegas police of not doing their job. The skull was quickly identified as that of the missing hiker, but what happened to her is still a total mystery. The police have not yet released a cause of death, so we can't say how she died. But it's pretty obvious that there was foul play involved. For whatever reason, Jawahir left her keys, phone, and wallet in her car, then hiked into the mountains and never returned. Number 8. Ancient village. There's an ancient and mysterious village in the mountains of Dagestan, Russia. It's one of the oldest settlements in the territory, likely built by a Khan hundreds of years ago. But because there are no actual historic records of the village, no one knows which Khan built it or when. What we do know is that this location was no accident. The village was built on the literal peak of a mountain over 4,500 feet above sea level. Plus, the city is completely surrounded by steep slopes and sheer cliffs, which would have made an invasion nearly impossible. Amazingly, the small village was occupied all the way until the 20th century, even having its own post office and hospital. But over time, as more and more people left the village, the place emptied out. It was completely abandoned about 40 years ago, and now it's nothing but a ruin. It looks as if it's thousands of years old, even though it was inhabited less than half a century ago. Number 7. Dyatlov Pass 2.0. In the Ural Mountains back in January of 1959, 10 members of the Ural Polytechnic Institute, who also happened to be experienced mountain climbers, went on a hiking trip and died. When they never came back out of the mountains, the authorities went looking for them. They discovered that the group had set up camp on the mountain of Kholat-Saikil. Then they all met horrifying and brutal deaths. The bodies of the hikers were found strewn across the mountain. One guy was found next to a cedar tree, partially undressed and covered in blood. Some people had their skull crushed or their chest smashed in, while 2 of them even had missing eyes and 1 person had a missing tongue. At the time, authorities ruled that they died of hypothermia, though of course hypothermia doesn't rip out your eyeballs. This has been a strange, unsolved mystery for over 60 years. Nobody knows what happened that night up in the mountains, if the mountaineers were hit by an avalanche or mauled by a monster. In 2021, it may have just happened again. Halfway through October, 8 tourists from Moscow ventured into the deadly Dyatlov Pass, the same place where the hikers from 1959 were killed, and they have not yet come back. They had apparently been paying tribute to the people who died there previously, and yet now they too are missing and presumed dead. Do you think these hikers were attacked by the same thing that murdered the other mountaineers 60 years ago? Or do you think it's just one great big coincidence? Let us know your thoughts in the comments and don't forget to hit subscribe. Number 6. Ancient Cliff Tombs. A mysterious collection of over 250 ancient tombs was just discovered in Egypt, with some of them dating back at least 4,200 years. The amazing discovery was made by accident, with the archaeological survey crew stumbling upon the Al-Hamidiyya necropolis near Sohag. The necropolis consists of hundreds of rectangular holes cut into the side of a mountain cliff. How nobody found them until now is even more of a mystery than the identity of those people who were entombed here. Naturally, all the bodies had already been pillaged for grave goods and were missing when archaeologists showed up. However, they figured out that the burial site here was used for over 2,000 years, starting in the Old Kingdom and ending around the time of Cleopatra's death in 30 BC. The big mystery with these mountain tombs is that historians aren't sure why the Egyptians chose such a random site in the middle of the desert to bury hundreds of seemingly unimportant people. According to historian Bassam el-Shama, the tombs were not big enough for royalty and must have been for common people. It was a graveyard for normal citizens, far removed from the more impressive burial grounds of the ultra-wealthy. Number 5. Monster in the Mountains. People living near Riverside County, California were rattled after a horrifying monster was sighted in the nearby mountains. It happened on a foggy morning when resident Kerry Shooker's cat ran inside his home, apparently terrified of something outside. When Kerry went to the door and looked out, he saw something just standing there and staring at him. From the way Kerry described it, the creature was the ugliest thing he'd ever seen. Now, Kerry lives on Box Springs Mountain, so he's no stranger to bizarre animals. There's plenty of wildlife around his home. But this thing was unlike anything he'd ever encountered. It kind of looked like a possum, except that it was even bigger than a coyote. It had huge teeth and wanted to eat his cat, and may have gotten it too if Kerry hadn't scared it off. According to Kerry and other fellow residents, the creature was a chupacabra. It was spotted by other people on the mountain as well. Some thought they simply encountered a sick coyote or wolf, but couldn't understand why the thing they were looking at had a long tail like a rat, the ears of a deer, no hair, and was horribly ugly. And since no one managed to catch the creature yet, it remains at large and on the loose, terrorizing the locals. Number 4. The Harry Potter Spider. The creepiest and most horrifying spider that you've ever seen in your life was recently discovered hiding in the mountains. The internet is losing its collective mind because the spider, identified as a type of wolf spider, looks identical to the huge spider called Aragog in the Harry Potter movies. In fact, the scientists who found it even named the new spider after the monster from Harry Potter. The creature was first spotted inside of its burrow in the mountainous region of Iran's Kerman province by the Iranian entomologist Alireza Nadiri. But mysteriously, researchers have only found the female spider. To this day, they've not managed to find a male spider, as he simply proved too elusive to catch. The spider itself isn't that unique from other wolf spiders, other than the fact that it looks just like the huge one from Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Number 3. Missing in the mountains. Maura Murray vanished in New Hampshire over 17 years ago. She was only 21 years old at the time, studying to become a nurse at UMass Amherst. Even after almost 2 decades, her family is still hoping to find closure and to uncover the mystery once and for all of what happened to Maura. A recent break in the case may have come in the form of human bone fragments. These fragments were discovered on Loon Mountain by a construction crew. Not every last piece of the skeleton was found, but enough fragments were uncovered that New Hampshire State Police are now analyzing them. Hopefully they'll be able to see if the bones belong to Maura Murray. But even if they are her bones, it still doesn't explain what happened to her. On February 9, 2004, Maura got into a car accident. She'd been driving north on Route 112 when it happened. Someone did stop and asked her if she needed help, but Maura refused. She then began walking, and no one yet knows what happened to her next. If these bones prove to be hers, she may have gone into the mountains for unknown reasons and then perished all those years ago. Then again, she may have been abducted and murdered. Number 2. Hyena horde. A mysterious pile of animal bones was found by archaeologists working in Saudi Arabia. They uncovered a hyena den deep within a mountain cave with a collection of bones going back 7,000 years. According to the archaeologist working on the project, they had officially found the site back in 2007, but were too scared to enter because they could hear the growling of dozens of animals inside. Only now did they brave the cave entrance again, finding it empty except for thousands of animal bones. Archaeologists found the bones of horses, goats, camels, cows, and even humans. It seems the hyenas had been using the cave for nearly 10,000 years, bringing back their victims and then leaving their bones behind. It was the closest thing anyone has ever found to the real-life hyena den from the Lion King movie, but you're probably wondering about those human bones. The truth is, we don't know if the hyenas were actually hunting people. They could have been digging up graves and dragging corpses back to their lair, since hyenas are known for being grave-digging scavengers. Number 1. Viking treasure box. In the icy mountains of Norway, melting glaciers have been revealing all kinds of amazing and mysterious artifacts left behind by their ancient relatives. In one of the most recent discoveries, archaeologists uncovered a mysterious wooden box with its lid still closed, even after 1,200 years. It's thanks to the ice that the wood was kept in such great condition, since most organic objects would have decayed after that amount of time. As you can imagine, the archaeologists were excited to take the box back to their lab and open it. They were hoping to find some Viking treasure, but what they found instead was equally as shocking. Instead of old Viking relics, the wooden box held nothing except scraps of beeswax. It had been used to hold nothing except an old candle. No gold, no jewels, just beeswax. Number 10. Camp Century. Camp Century was a military base built by the US on a Greenland ice sheet back in the year 1959. To the public, it was nothing but a science station. But the only science going on here was nuclear. The site was top secret, used for testing nuclear missile deployment from the Arctic. The US needed a base where they could easily hit Russia with nuclear missiles if it came down to that during the Cold War. In 1967, the camp was decommissioned overnight and abandoned. But much of its infrastructure was never taken down or disposed of properly. At the time, the military simply assumed that all the toxic waste and nuclear garbage would be covered by snowfall. So they left behind over 50,000 gallons of fuel, thousands of gallons of waste, and an unknown amount of radioactive coolant. At first, the snow did cover the waste. But as our planet has started warming in recent years, the waste has been revealed yet again. Scientists are now worrying that as the ice continues to melt, all the leftover nuclear waste at Camp Century is going to leak into the water, poisoning the ocean. The camp's infrastructure, as well as any remaining biological, chemical, and radioactive waste, will re-enter the environment and potentially disrupt nearby ecosystems and even human health on a broader scale. Now the question is, who is responsible for cleaning up the waste? This question could lead to a political dispute, and right now, pretty much nothing is being done to fix the problem. Number 9. Hartsville Nuclear Plant. Construction of the Hartsville nuclear plant began in 1975. It was supposed to meet the electrical needs of Tennessee over the coming years. But back in the 70s, it was the biggest nuclear plant in the entire world. In the sleepy little town of Hartsville, the economy was booming. They were in desperate need of construction workers, there were all kinds of new businesses, and the population spiked. Everything was looking up. Less than 10 years later, everything started going downhill. The decision was made to stop the project before it could ever be completed. In other words, the nuclear plan was scrapped. The remains were simply left abandoned with a few partially constructed buildings still littering the landscape to this very day. The boom in Hartsville went bust, a lot of people moved away, and it went back to being a sleepy rural town. Now all that Hartsville has are tourists who come to gawk at the unfinished nuclear facility, looking like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. To this day, there hasn't been any real reasons given as to why the project was abandoned. Primarily, those responsible, the Tennessee Valley Authority, say it was a budgeting issue. Number 8. South Carolina nuclear fail. In 2017, just 2 years before a pair of nuclear power plants were supposed to be up and running in South Carolina, both projects were abruptly stopped. The owners suspended all work, leaving the pair of multi-billion-dollar power plants simply abandoned and completely useless. After the huge failure of nuclear power in the 70s and 80s, these were the first reactors built for a long while in the US. They started being built in 2013. But in 2017, the company responsible for the project, called Westinghouse, went bankrupt. The CEO of the company then complained that it was all just taking way too long. They would have missed their 2019 deadline and not have completed the nuclear plant until 2024. Apparently, this was reason enough to scrap the whole thing. Sadly, this was a $7 billion failure. Yep, $7 billion went into this project and it wasn't even finished. And this is in the middle of the US trying to kickstart its nuclear industry, something that's been ignored for decades while other nations have been focusing on it heavily. Number 7. The 1958 Ford Nucleon. The 1958 Ford Nucleon was a car that was supposed to drive over 5,000 miles, 8,047 kilometers without ever refueling. It was going to do this by using a tiny nuclear reactor. It was a typical car for its day, looking like a futuristic vehicle that you might see in the Jetsons. But of course, this was just a concept. The car never actually got around to being built. The problem was that the reactor core, even though it could theoretically have fit into the engine compartment, couldn't be converted to mechanical energy. But to understand this a bit better, we need to look at how nuclear reactors actually work. They generate a significant amount of heat, which boils water into steam, which then spins a turbine to create electricity. But even after the concept for the Ford Nucleon came out, scientists couldn't figure out how to use the heat from a nuclear reactor to spin the car's wheels. And to be honest, scientists still don't know how this works. If you were hoping for a nuclear car, you'll probably be waiting another 100 years. If the Ford Nucleon were a reality, would you drive around in a car that had a nuclear reactor in its engine compartment? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below, and if you're liking this video, be sure to hit the thumbs up and subscribe buttons if you haven't already. Number 6. Portable nuclear power. 60 years ago, the United States military was experimenting with portable nuclear power across several remote bases. This was back in 1964 during the height of the Cold War. One of these devices was the so-called PM-2A, a nuclear reactor that required only 44 pounds, 20 kilograms of uranium to power a remote base. Even though the reactor weighed 330 tons, it was built from pieces that could each fit into a C-130, a type of cargo plane. This meant the pieces could technically be put together anywhere for remote nuclear power. The US experimented with this portable power at one place we already talked about today, Camp Century. But they used all kinds of portable reactors in other places as well. They used a different model called the PM-3A at a Navy base in Antarctica. But it malfunctioned 438 times in 10 years and leaked nuclear material into the Antarctic Ocean. There was a portable SL-1 reactor being used in Idaho, which blew up and killed 3 people. And in Virginia, the SM-1 is still sitting abandoned near Fort Belvoir. In the end, portable nuclear power just didn't really seem like it was actually worth it. The idea was scrapped until just recently when the Pentagon initiated Project Pele. This was in May of 2021, with the project aimed at designing a portable nuclear reactor that'll fit into a truck. They have 5 years to complete the project, so let's just see what happens. Number 5. 3 Mile Island disaster. In the morning hours of March 28, 1979, the worst nuclear accident in the history of the US took place. It's been compared to the disaster at Chernobyl, but not quite as bad. It happened when the reactor of Unit 2 had a malfunction. A pressure valve refused to close. Cooling water was contaminated with radiation. It drained from the open valve into the other buildings at the site, and within just minutes, the core began to overheat. All of this happened at the 3 Mile Island nuclear power plant, which was constructed in 1974 on a sandbar on the Susquehanna River. This place is just 10 miles, 16 kilometers from Harrisburg. By 1978, many parts of the state were enjoying affordable and reliable energy thanks to the 3 Mile Island plant. But back to the overheating. The emergency cooling pumps began to solve the problem by cooling down the core. If left alone, everything would have been totally fine because the safety devices would have prevented a crisis. But humans in the control room misread what was happening and shut down the water system. Silly humans. This resulted in the core heating to 4,000 degrees, just 1,000 degrees shy of a total meltdown. If the core had actually melted down completely, it would have resulted in a huge explosion of radiation, which probably would have killed hundreds and even thousands of people. Even though the plant didn't melt down, it was still a very close call and the closest call ever in the US. Number 4. Cherokee Nuclear Power Plant. The Cherokee Nuclear Power Plant was a massive failure. The project began in the 70s just outside the small city of Gaffney in South Carolina. Duke Power was the company behind the construction of what was planned to be a power plant with 3 nuclear reactors. But like almost every other nuclear project in the 1970s, this one stalled because of economic issues. In the 80s, all work was suspended and the half-finished reactors were abandoned. The abandoned power plant is still there today. In December of 2007, the company Duke Energy filed an application to build a new power plant very close to the old site. The estimated building cost is $11 billion. As of right now, construction still hasn't even started. And to be honest, it probably never will. Number 3. Nuclear waste at the beach. The San Onofre nuclear power plant in California shut down many years ago. Unfortunately, it's still a massive problem because there are currently 3.6 million pounds, 1,632,933 kilograms of nuclear waste buried on a California beach. This is San Onofre State Beach, and it would be paradise if not for the giant power plant rearing up above the sand. Still, it's popular with tourists. It's close to one of the biggest Marine Corps bases in the US, and there's a Native American site that's over 10,000 years old just down the street. Problems with the plant began almost a decade ago in 2012 when a small radioactive leak was detected. By 2013, the Southern California Edison Company decided to shut the plant down instead of just fixing the problem. Now, the nuclear waste is sitting there, stranded, as the nuclear plant is subjected to corrosion, to the threat of sea level rise, and even the threat of earthquakes, which inch closer and closer to the day of disaster. If nothing is done soon, the nuclear reactor will eventually crack, spilling out millions of tons of toxic waste onto the beach and into the water. Sorry, Earth. Number 2. Marble Hill Nuclear Power Plant. The Marble Hill Nuclear Power Plant was a waste of $2.7 billion. Back in 1973, Public Service Indiana proposed to build a nuclear power generator. It was to be located 45 minutes from Louisville in Kentucky. At the time, it was only supposed to cost $700 million. It would employ hundreds of people and be the biggest capital project in the history of Indiana. Naturally, everybody was very thrilled at the idea of nuclear power and more jobs. But there was controversy pretty much right away. Public Service Indiana was accused of forging numbers, with experts saying the plant was going to cost significantly more than they estimated. Plus, it was just after the 3 Mile Island incident and people were paranoid. Still, they went on with the construction. Between 1973 and 1979, operations were stopped 3 separate times. There were too many reports of poor construction. In other words, the builders were taking too many shortcuts and building an unsafe nuclear reactor. Costs spiraled out of control, the public was furious, and in 1984, all work at Marble Hall ceased. Even when the plant closed down, they still needed $4 billion more to complete it. Number 1. Nuclear secrets. Jonathan Tuba, a nuclear engineer with the U.S. Navy, along with his wife Diana, were just arrested in West Virginia for trying to sell nuclear secrets to a foreign state. According to the report from the BBC, the couple tried to sell design data for a nuclear submarine. They handed the designs over, stashed in a peanut butter sandwich, to a person whom they thought was representing a different country. But it wasn't a spy, it was an undercover FBI agent. This is an extremely bizarre case, especially because these people seem so ordinary. Jonathan had national security clearance and his wife was a high school teacher. But in April of 2020, he got caught by the Justice Department sending a package to a foreign government with restricted data, suggesting that he could sell U.S. secrets for money. The FBI was obviously not too happy. They intercepted the package, set up a sting operation, and caught Jonathan in the act. He's been charged with some kind of treason under the Atomic Energy Act. But because this literally just went down a couple of days ago, we're still waiting to see what kind of sentence Jonathan and his wife get once they go to court. How do you feel about all these insane nuclear projects that failed? Let us know in the comments and be sure to hit subscribe. Thanks so much for watching today's video, and don't forget to check out all the other amazing videos that we have right here on American Eye.